For the music? Welcome to the 48th episode of Renegade Marketers Live, a show that promises to be long on marketing insights and short on overhyped buzzwords. We'll be drinking in the latest tactics and the coolest gin. Yep, this may be the only live marketing show that also features a gin tasting. This show is being live streamed via our friends at Restream, and if you want to drink along at home, today we're tasting Brooklyn and New Amsterdam gins. All right. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, live from my home studio in New York City. As I rant about in my latest book, Renegade Marketing 12 Steps to Building Unbeatable B2B Brands, you can have the courage of a Wakanda warrior, the artfulness of Taika Waititi, the thoughtfulness of Mother Teresa, and still come up short as a CMO unless you back it all up with science, like my man, Ben Franklin. The marketing success that Franklin achieved with France, getting their king to fund a revolution, was only possible because of his scientific reputation that preceded him. Putting it more succinctly, no science for CMOs, no glory. So on this show, we're going to explore a range of approaches to measurement, examining how various marketers develop their metrics, establish their goals, and chart their achievements. With that, let's bring on Kevin Sellers, CMO of Ping Identity and star of episode 218 and 243 of Renegade Marketers Unite. Welcome back, Kevin.
Thanks, Drew. Be here.
Good to be anywhere, as they say. So,
right.
Now I noticed on your bio that you minored in Korean. What drew you to that language? And, are you going to share your first words of wisdom in Korean?
Well, the first word I learned in Korean was 화장실 어디 있습니까, which is where's the bathroom? So there's important things. There's a hierarchy of things you have to learn. But I lived in Korea for a couple of years, learned how to speak the language, had to speak the language, came back and had a chance to minor in the language, which was amazing. So I would just say, to kick us off, 오늘 우리가 이렇게 만날 수 있는 것을 제가 좋은 것을 생각합니다. So basically what I said was, hey, I think the fact that we could get together and meet like this is a pretty cool thing. So that's kind of what I just.
Awesome. All right. Well, for all our Korean listeners, welcome as well. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I was in Seoul in 2008, and it's just really a great city. I don't think people realize what a cool city it's become.
And I was there. It was a long time ago, and it was before the Olympics, actually. So it was 100,000 years ago. But the Olympics and other things, and the modernization of Korea is stunning. It's amazing.
Okay. So speaking of modernization, you've been at Ping Identity for over 3 years now. Can you give us a sense of, what the overview of the metrics that matter to you sort of right now, and maybe how those have evolved over the last few years?
Sure. I think a lot of us grapple with this. I know when I got here, we had a lot of the kind of metrics where it's easy for marketing, I think, to fall a little bit into a trap of where we measure activity, right? And we kind of call it activity-based marketing. We did these many activities. We generated this many leads. All those things are things that we can track and we should track. But flipping that from how do I get off of activity-based and into impact-based, and what are the real things that drive impact? So the metrics we track, and I just pulled them up here, that we track and report on all the time, both to the company as well as to the board. We obviously look at things like pipeline, which matters, but we need to break that down and look at the sources of pipeline and the conversion of those. So we take our goals are tied to the field's goals around, obviously, revenue is the most important goal that all of us have. So I think if we have activity-based metrics around just pipeline generation or just lead generation of any kind, we can sort of win the battle and still lose the war. So tying everything back to a revenue metric allows us to think about things in ways that says it may not be the quantity of leads or quantity of pipeline that matters, but really what is my conversion rate and what's my revenue growth rate? And am I seeing improvements across the generation, but more importantly, the conversion of the pipeline? So we have a series of very impact related metrics as it ties to pipeline. But then we also get into, we break all that down into, like, we take the digital piece pretty seriously. Like, we want to look very hard at, our search, for example. Search is the digital gold of our generation, of our time. And so we look at very specific terms and the progress we're making and the ranking we're getting, because there's thousands and tens of thousands of searches happening just in our space every single day. So competing there and winning the volume in an ever improving fashion is super important for us. So we track a lot of our digital metrics again that way, and we track for trends, we track for impact, we tie that back to lead generation all the way through to revenue. So those things are really, really important. And then we have a number of things that we track. For example, we used to look in our communications aspect, we used to look at things like share of voice. Now, share of voice is important, and we want to have a good share of voice, but it's an incomplete metric if you want to measure success in that space. We do things, we have a combined metric of quantity and quality. So we look at things like, okay, what's my share of voice in my category? But then we look at message pull through. We have a defined set of core messages that we want to see get pulled through and into the marketplace. So we measure that as well to give us a better sense of, is our PR and our corporate communications function delivering impact, right? And then we do a number of things around our content engine, right? We look at the specific types of content and the content contribution to revenue conversion, and we measure those as well. We look at things like competitive churn and base and upsell and cross-sell renewal and retention and those types of things as it relates to the base customer. So I think the way and then we have a set of partner marketing objectives too. I won't go into here, but really I think the key for us has been, how do we move off of just measuring activity, and how do we get into really measuring impact and whether or not we're driving the business forward, and certainly the top line, which is what we're all paid to do. And I think we've now adjusted those to the point where we can have a very transparent and honest conversation as to whether our tactics and strategies are really delivering the types of impact we want, and not getting caught up in just, we did things, but we actually are delivering impact.
And is this an evolutionary approach? I mean, I'm imagining it took some time to get the systems in place so that you could show the impact you were having on revenue.
It definitely was an evolutionary thing, but it's like, you got like, our board was super anxious to know, hey, are the investments we're making, are they actually delivering? And you can take that all the way down to even things like events, and I think most people probably do this, but you can really measure now, is this a worthwhile investment? Are we actually getting something out of it beyond this sort of amorphous brand uplift that people want to debate that you get from being at events, which I'm a little more skeptical on. I want to know that we're actually creating connections that are leading to growth opportunities. So we've taken it down from the micro and then up to the macro, and it's been like cheered all the way, because now we can have, and even the CFO, we have a real conversation around, and he's so willing to put more money into it. Just show me impact. So we're able to now have that type of conversation that is something we weren't having just a couple of years ago.
So I'm wondering, so one of the things that I have heard that a complaint from boards to CMOs is you share too much data, and that and that you could have stopped at impact-based pipeline, right? That
you could,
the board,
right.
Full stop. Everything else is how you got there,
right?
In some ways, right? So I just wanted to put a point on that and make sure that folks, even though you have all this data and it's great and it leads up to it, I mean, ultimately, and you described it really simply, that we have the right quality of leads in the pipeline that marketing is helping to drive, marketing is helping to nurture, and marketing is helping to close. And that the close rates is accelerating and the deal size is accelerating.
Right.
So,
right.
Okay. And that could be just enough for a board.
Absolutely.
My bigger question is, current customers have got to be a big part of revenue too. And when you're looking at this, does customer marketing, retention, and are there different set of metrics? And because all we talked about there felt like net new.
Yeah, and it's true. A lot of what we do is net new, but we do have a specific motion around, base. So, net retention and churn reduction and upsell, cross sell. So we take specific goals on those and we measure. We don't spend as much money, obviously, in that part of the world than we do in the net new, but we absolutely track that because to be honest, it changes from time to time, but we're probably 70% of our revenue is base. Right.
Yeah.
And about a third is a little less than a third is net new. And that's actually pretty healthy, we think, but we want to make sure that it doesn't really dip below that because you can't base expand if you're not adding to it. Right. So
Right.
At some point that will run its course if you're not careful and you rely too heavily on the base. So I agree with that.
And so it just, while you in marketing are not spending 70% of your dollars against base, it's probably you're not even spending 30% of your dollars against base.
Correct.
The organization, I'm imagining, somewhere is spending, it may not be in the marketing department, but is spending a goodly amount of revenue, of cost, if you will, to maintain, customer success and make sure that they're using the product and getting full advantage, all those things, right? I mean, that investment is there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, for sure. It's a huge part of obviously us hitting our goals. And we break down, we look at our revenue targets and we break them down by net new, by churn reduction, by base expansion, and specifically within base expansion, upsells and particular products or initiatives that we want to track. And then what we do in marketing is we kind of help with the play development. What's the play? So for example, we're in the identity space. Okay. So one of the things we're doing with our customers that exist today is a lot of them are still using what's referred to as kind of straightforward single sign-on and multi-factor authentication capability for employees and customers to both log in and be authenticated. A lot of them, though, one of the things we're trying to do is help them realize that passwords are kind of part of the problem. Passwords are crackable. Passwords are infinitely stealable. So we create a play around how do we help our customer migrate to a passwordless authentication experience. Right. That's the kind of thing. We develop the play, we develop the messaging, the framework, and then we work with our customer success teams, our field teams, our SAs. We go out there and we have a coordinated play. It doesn't require paid media, but it requires a lot of other things that we do that allows us to really have a focused conversation with that customer and help them on a path to something better rather than just knocking on the door saying we got another widget you should buy. It's a very different approach than just trying to sell products. It's really journeys that we map out to help customers move to the next phase of their cloud evolution.
Got it. Okay, we're going to come back to you because we got to get into this brand thing and measuring that, but we'll be back on that. In the meantime, we're going to bring on Deidre Hudson, CMO of Payability, star of episode 45 of this show. Hello, Deidre. How are you?
I'm good, Drew. How are you? Good to see you.
Great to have you back on the show so quickly. Now, I just noticed you're working on an MS in psychology. I'm really curious about, where this path has helped your marketing career.
Yeah, I've had an interest in psychology for quite a while. I love data and I love insights that it brings, and I love to learn. And psychology kind of addresses a couple of those things for me because on the one hand, it's data, right? Psychology is it's like data of the mind. And I became very interested in it in my early days. We were using demographic and behavioral-based segmentation models. And I just was enamored with the fact that one row of numbers in an Excel spreadsheet could indicate an entirely different kind of person than another row. So I wanted to dig deeper into that. And then the other part of it, particularly where I am in my coursework right now, is about research. So this kind of feeds into my love for A/B testing and applying, an analytical approach to marketing. So I'm slowly chipping away at it. Classes start again in November, and
all right. Well, we wish you good luck with that. But let's talk metrics. What are when you look at metrics and think about those, what's on your priority list?
Yes, I like what we were saying before about distinguishing between the activity metrics and impact metrics. And the way that I think about metrics currently is basically in three levels, kind of going from the broad down to the smaller, from I guess macro to micro. So the top is kind of more the company level metrics, right? These are unit economics that are pretty common in the SaaS business, right? It's looking at CAC, it's looking at LTV numbers, looking at our LTV to CAC ratios, looking at our payback periods, looking at gross margins, and then looking, some revenue metric. It can be, it's commonly kind of ARR or MRR. For us, it's kind of ARPA, ARPA, average revenue per account. So we look at that at the company level to really understand the health of the company, right, and how we're doing from that level. Then the next level down, these are the funnel metrics. These are the pipeline metrics. These are looking at our full funnel, looking at all the conversion points throughout the funnel, looking at what those conversion numbers are, looking at how we are comparing, from time period to time period, from channel to channel. And this allows us to be very diagnostic, because if we see, for instance, a break in one part of the funnel, we can go back to that point and look before that and see, what's happening. That helped us to figure out an issue we were having in our messaging at one point. It's helped us to figure out, spend and kind of how we should allocate budget. One of the things that helped us in that regard. And then the third level is now we're looking at the channel level metrics. And the channel level metrics is kind of a combination of the two, because now we're going to look at those unit economics by channel, and we're going to look at, the funnel metrics by channel, see how the channels are performing. And then there's been very, bespoke activity metrics that come into those channels. So, the metrics that are in the paid media, impressions and CTRs and things like that, versus a direct mail channel, account creates and account conversions. And so that's how we look at it, kind of these three levels. And I made sure that I wrote down in my notes to let you know that these are for new customer acquisition. You just mentioned that they sound like those other metrics didn't sound like they incorporated, kind of upsell and expansion. So these are definitely for customer acquisition. The renewals and the upsell will definitely have a little bit slightly different metrics.
And does marketing play a role in renewals and I mean, in that part of it, the customer metrics?
That's more for our sales team is really kind of driving that, because we're a marketing and sales led organization. Marketing is very very tip of the spear, very bringing in the right leads, really partnering with sales to kind of see how they're getting through the pipeline and looking at all those conversion touch points. That's another reason why looking at these company level and funnel metrics at the channel is so important, because we really need to understand which channels are performing and leading to the types of customers that we're bringing in, helping us to convert into closed won deals and really bringing in the kind of business that we want.
Now, unless the world has completely changed, very few marketing decisions are so 1, 2, 3, 4 transactional, right? I mean, it's one thing you go on an Amazon and you buy a book, right? That's boom. You know what you're going to buy, boom, it's done. But in software, it's a more complicated, software as a service. Obviously, there are multiple decisions. So when you're looking at this metric, what do you, and all these, I'm not just imagining, I mean, you listed a huge number of things that you're looking at. How do you really, and we could either look at this by funnel or by stage or by channel. How are you certain that, that the spending you're doing is really aligns ultimately with that end deal closed?
That's a great question. One of the things that initiative that we started to do was to look at how we were allocating our budget. And I talked with my CEO about this. I think it really comes down to looking at the end result and then working backwards, right? So looking at what our LTV to CAC ratios were by channel, and then using that to figure out what our CPA should be by channel, right? So if we are paying, X number of dollars to acquire a customer through paid media, and maybe that CPA is, 3X, 2X, whatever the cost to acquire that customer through direct mail, what does that really ultimately net out in as far as LTV is concerned? So LTV should really have a play in determining how much we pay for those customers to acquire them by channel, because a customer that I acquired through a paid media channel could have a totally different LTV than the customer that I acquired through direct mail. And those CPAs need to take that into consideration.
But LTV, lifetime value, is a lagging indicator, right? It takes a while to figure out. I mean, you're projecting it based on averages, or you have to wait and see. So this is backwards looking at lifetime value, sort of, 3 years ago, we acquired a customer using this method, this channel, and they're still with us. So then the lifetime value is, I mean, how do you get there?
Yeah, it's a starting point. I mean, we used the previous year LTV to kind of start this exercise. So it definitely is a starting point. But I think that it's the starting point to get us to a place that's a bit more precise in terms of how to allocate budget, right? As opposed to saying, okay, we spent X amount of dollars last year. Let's, spend 25% more of that this year, or 25% more this year, right? And let's just divide it the way we've been dividing it. I think it's gets us to a place where we are able to be a little bit more diagnostic and a little bit more precise in terms of lining up spend to results.
Do you have a data point for how many touches you need to close?
That's a question I love to ask. It's like, how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll pop, right?
Yeah, I'm curious because it's so funny. A lot of things are going through my mind, and there's the notion that this is actually direct marketing and that we can spend a certain money here and we can close the deal over here, and that there might not need to be 10 or other touches. And then what happens, in my mind at least, is there's that one piece of content that only 5 people read, but those 5 people all bought. Where there's another piece of content that 100 people read and none of them bought it. And so the two of you so far, Kevin, have sort of really shown a sense of linearness. And I'm just thinking of Brent Adamson's buyer journey. That's this just massive spaghetti chart. This is an unfair question, but how confident are you in your understanding of that? I spend in this channel, I get revenue out?
Oh, I am not as confident as I would like to be. I think most marketers could say that, if we could predict that with a high level of precision, I think we'd all be multimillionaires. So.
Okay. And I just think that real sort of relief moment, because otherwise I was thinking, oh my God, you are just, yeah. All right. Perfect. That's a great place. And now we can go to Khalid. Khalid Khatib was the CMO of Stack Overflow, because he's gonna get us right to that precise moment, right, Khalid?
No one can do that. If they can, they're lying.
Yeah. Oh, well, anyway, welcome back. Khalid was the star of episode 181 and 259 of Renegade Marketers Unite. So how are you and where are you?
Doing well. I'm in New York, actually. I'm one day post our first ever Stack Overflow customer conference and our first large scale event in person in many years.
Wow. Oh, that's so cool. I want to come back to that. But I noticed, first of all, that you were a Wash U grad, which is where my son-in-law went. So it's now in the family. Did you have 3 majors?
I didn't. I studied political science, psychology, and creative writing.
Okay.
My passion was for creative writing, but they only had a minor. And so I maxed out in the amount of courses I could take that related to it, but it only got me that minor.
Okay. So, but there's minors there anyway. That's amazing. And did you have dreams of writing the great American novel?
I did and still do. I moved to New York thinking I'd only be here for 1 year and applied for MFA programs concurrently. And then, one thing led to another. I put off grad school after getting in and I just never went. But I continue to write on the side. I write for a bunch of magazines and I'll write a book eventually, hopefully.
Awesome. Well, while the show goes on, we will research some of those and maybe try to find some links and share them in the show notes.
Of course, yeah.
By the way, just for comparison, I came to New York many years ago thinking I'd be on the 2-year plan. And many decades later, I'm still here. It does have a certain stickiness. And I'm just not referring to the sidewalk on a hot summer day. Let's dive into the topic at hand and talk about I'm assuming you have an executive dashboard. And if so, what are the core KPIs on that?
Yeah, I think, look, in the spirit of being interesting relative to what's already been shared, because there's already been some really smart insights, I think a couple of things that I do differently, because a lot of what we talk about and share has already been discussed, is one, how like cross-functional it is. So for us, this sort of cadence or this report out, obviously it happens in quarterly ops reviews, our board meetings, and there are real-time dashboards that folks have access to. But there are two ways that we really scrutinize this data. One is in a weekly business review, where we bring together about 20 leaders across all of go-to-market, and include some product leaders and the full executive team. And that's where we talk about pipeline, some of the metrics that have already been shared, CAC, most effective channels, what have you. And we do a smaller group meeting. That's me, my head of demand generation, our CRO, our CFO, and our CEO. And that's where we do a deep dive into any deals that are at risk, any new campaigns that are launching, any challenges, operational challenges that we're seeing. So if there's like a drop off in SDR activity or what have you. And so, that to me is interesting. And it's something that our CEO implemented when he joined 2.5 years ago. That's just been so like a huge help in terms of cross-functional collaboration and unlocking a lot of productivity. The other thing that's interesting about the sort of metrics as we look at them is one, ensuring that some of the KPIs that have already been discussed, like pipeline, for example, time to close, what have you, are reporting up by region. I think that's, it's always been important, but it's especially paramount right now when you're seeing so many macroeconomic issues impact different regions and territories differently. And then a related point, just given this strange economic environment that we're in right now, is we look really closely and increasingly so at the percent change week over week. Ideally you see it go up, the amount of pipeline being generated. There's of course seasonality. There are things that happen towards the end of the quarter, but we want to obsessively focus on any trends that we're seeing, any red flags, any leading indicators that sort of give us pause, like form fills, for example. At the start of the pandemic, there was a sort of catastrophic drop in form fills, and then it ticked back up. And I think a lot of companies, including us, are asking ourselves, like, what's happening right now, and what data sources can we look to ensure that we are reacting appropriately to this moment that we're in.
So from a regional standpoint, I'm assuming places like Europe are slowing down a lot faster than what you're seeing in the US.
To some extent. I mean, I think a lot of companies are seeing that. We're fortunate in that, our products, which are sold to developers and technologists, continue to perform quite well.
Right.
And I think that by looking at those sort of regional trends and those trends by industry, we are being a little more sophisticated about how we target and the sources that we're using as well.
So we've spent a lot of time so far on the show talking about pipeline, go-to-market, and those metrics. But you mentioned at the top that you just had your first ever customer event. Mm-hmm. And as I'm curious, on your dashboard, do you have customer metrics?
We do. We need to be more sophisticated about that, like everyone, right? Like, because this is a shared responsibility with a customer success team, which at our company reports into our CRO. So the revenue organization comprises sales and customer success. And this is something that we need to better report on, one, to ensure that, we're spending efficiently, but also so we get credit for it. Like it sounds so silly, the longer I work in marketing, the more I recognize that like swag, which I say with a Midwest accent, an Iowa accent, will always be a big part of my job, regardless how big the company is or how senior I get. And like something as small as sending a box of t-shirts. And again, we are fortunate to have a very beloved brand by developers to a customer, can accelerate a deal, can lead to or directly impact an upsell. And saying like, okay, to what extent did $500 worth of t-shirts influence this deal is something that we need to get much more scientific about.
But I just have to, for the moment, is just sort of revel in the enduring power of swag and just and laugh with you about it.
You could do
because
you could do a whole show about it. You
yeah,
really could.
no, I
Yeah.
can. And in fact, we should. It's like we should just have a bring the best swag party to the table
Just
because
as an aside, we yesterday at our customer conference, which I thought was quite clever, a recommendation from our agencies, we screen printed all of our shirts on demand. So there was some optionality: pick your color, pick the design that you want to screen print, and a sustainability element. So we only used as much swag as people actually wanted.
there you go. And that's such a, I did do a show with the CMO of that one of the services that distributes swag, and she was a big believer in unbranded because so much of branded, particularly things like bags, just get thrown away at the trade show. So that's a really smart move of letting people pick the color, pick the size, pick the imprint. That's brilliant. Yeah, that really because then they feel special. I can't help but sort of, I'm thinking about a conversation that we actually had in CMO Huddles the other day. I was looking at the transcript, and one of the things that the CMO talked about was the metric that mattered with customers was how likely they were to say, could I live with their response to the question, could I live without your brand? And I thought that was such an interesting question to ask customers. What would happen if we took it away? And we think about the couple of months of conversations that we've had in Huddles about recession preparedness. Well, that's all about securing customers and loving customers. But if they can think about living without you, you're not going to keep them.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked about this also in this concept of community marketing. So we often say, Stack Overflow is a massive website that reaches 100 million developers and technologists, and then we sell a private version of it to companies of this collaboration software and Q&A form. And I say, and I know our salespeople certainly say, we don't really sell a product, we sell a community. And I think it gets to exactly what you're saying is, if there is a cohort within your company and a valuable population of folks like developers, for example, who can't live without your product and really evangelize your brand, then you have stickiness that other things don't.
Like New York City.
Yeah.
So, and again, I'm going to sort of bring this together. A KPI could be how many people at your customer conference wanted a t-shirt that had your brand name on it.
Yeah.
And, you could quickly look at those that took it with the brand name and those that didn't, right? And figure out, oh, that's interesting. Because that's your loyalty index.
Yeah,
right?
That's super smart. Everything is data. Yeah.
It is evangelist mode. Okay. We're going to we've been talking about Huddles, but we're going to talk a little bit more about Huddles. Launched in 2020, CMO Huddles. Yeah, excuse me. I need a little glass of water. CMO Huddles is an exclusive community of over 100 highly effective B2B CMOs who share, care, and dare each other to greatness. It is indeed a community. Everything about CMO Huddles is designed to be a force multiplier, helping you to make faster, better, and more informed decisions, where one inspiring hour a month delivers 10 hours of perspiration saved. Since no CMO can outwork their job, CMO Huddles is here to help you outsmart it. So let's bring Khalid, Deidre, Kevin back. And what I'm interested in ingesting, and I'm fishing here for a bit, but I'm wondering if you could share a specific example of how CMO Huddles has helped you over, as long as you've been a member. Khalid, you've been with us, I think, you were in the beta, so you've been with us the longest. I'm just curious if there's a moment that you said, well, yeah, this really made a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think one in particular, I find one-to-one. I came from a company called GLG, which does a lot of, sort of expertise and one-to-one consultations. And so I find one-to-one to be extraordinarily helpful because you can sort of pick within the 100 plus CMOs that you have, who has the company that's most similar to yours, or like aspirationally, like what company do you want to be in 1, 3, 5 years? And so one conversation I had with the CMO at another SaaS company was as our product marketing team was growing, going from like 3 to 10, I said, look, there are so many resources out there on how to scale a product marketing team. There are so many org charts that do and don't make sense to me. Can you tell me how your team is structured, what KPIs you track, and what profile you look for when you're building out a product marketing team? And that was like so much, that 30-minute conversation was so much more helpful than any of the analyst reports that I could look at, or, org charts are notoriously difficult to find online. So to me, that was just one sort of aha moment where I literally helped to build a team out, or the blueprint for a team based on one of those conversations.
Amazing. We're going to have to get you another 101 soon. You'll just have to give us a topic. Okay. Kevin, you've been on the show. You've shared many wonderful thoughts. I don't want to push you on this one, but if you had a specific example, that'd be awesome.
Well, I think Khalid kind of took the best one, which is just connecting with people that have particular expertise, because no CMO really is an expert in everything that we're asked to do. So being able to connect with individuals that have a background and an expertise in something that you might find needful or helpful to your company. I have had the connection with probably a half dozen and been on both sides of that, where you've been able to share insights and learning, but also ask for help and insights that have made us better. So clearly it's the community effect, which I think is the most important, and the sharing of tips and things. Those all are great, but I think it's the connection and the networking, because it's not just general networking. You're able to learn from people you really need help learning from. So that's what I found most valuable.
And I love it. And by the way, this is real-time product research, because it's just making me think we got to build out our one-on-one program a little more robustly. And two, we're starting to do one-on-ones in the huddles themselves, just to create that opportunity for the conversation to continue. Okay, Deidre, I don't want to leave you out. If you got something you want to share, please. Otherwise, we'll get back to the conversation.
No, I think I'll mimic a lot of what Khalid and Kevin said. I haven't taken advantage of the one-to-ones quite as frequently, so now I will do so. But I think also just the community, just having access to other people who are kind of in the same boat with you. I've made some good connections that started with CMO Huddle and kind of continued outside of the group. And just having the support system, kind of knowing other people are kind of going through the same things that you're going through and having the same challenges. So that's been really helpful.
Awesome. Thank you all for that. And if you're a B2B CMO, you happen to be watching this show, and if you can share and care and dare with the best of them, check out CMOHuddles.com. Thank you for those great comments. And Khalid, I'm curious. Now we're back. We're talking, all four of us. Let's have all four of us on the screen. I'm curious how and we'll start with Khalid, how you're approaching attribution. I know that there's Visible, and I think there's another tool out there, but I've never seen CMOs say, God, that tool is just killing it. How are you approaching that? Because we're saying that marketing is driving pipeline. And so, but what is that? What's that look like right now? What is state of the art with attribution?
If someone else knows and they can tell me, that would be super helpful. I think, we're using Visible, not to be confused with Bizibo, which was our events vendor yesterday. And we are still on our marketing attribution journey. And so, I think we're a 14-year-old business that have various lines of business, some of which have evolved over time. And so our Salesforce instance, like many other folks, is quite messy. And our UTM parameters have changed 300 times since I've worked here. So there's a lot of cleanup efforts that are underway. And the two things that we're doing, one is continuing to educate reps on best practices around Salesforce, how we think about attribution, and how they can help us get better about it when it comes to record keeping. The other thing that we're doing when it comes to reporting out on attribution to our CEO or CFO, et cetera, is saying, okay, of all of the sources that we have, this is the one where we have the highest confidence interval in terms of we know that the attribution here works. So Alice is an easy one. Alice and Reach Desk, gifting vendors for meeting booking and the equivalent. We very clearly know, because we've educated the reps, we brought that tool on board when our marketing operations leader was here, how it's influencing deals. Other things, bigger channels like search, SEM, more challenging. But, just being transparent is basically our approach to
well, I want to go back to the thing you said at the beginning, which of this part of the thing is, messy Salesforce. And I've heard that a lot in huddles, that a lot of folks have that. And I think it all breaks there. And so some of the solutions, at least some of the CMOs have said, you guys in sales, you can't touch Salesforce. Only marketing ops or whatever, this neutral ground can touch it. So because dirty data, bad data is bad output. And if Salesforce everybody is dependent on, it's a problem. So Kevin, anything in attribution that you're excited about?
Yeah, it's the tough question. I mean, we use a tool called Caliber Mind. We use a first touch, last touch, and it's good. It's not great. I think I don't know that. I'm wondering if great exists, but we have a decent idea of what our attribution is. But it is the question that we ask ourselves a lot. But I think we've gotten past the notion of sourcing to the point of sort of chest pounding on whether marketing or sales or partner sourced was X or Y or Z. I think we've moved past that because we're really focused on quality of funnel, which I think is a step in a maturity curve for us, which is good. Obviously, we want to do a better job of that because we're measuring tactical success, like what's working and what isn't working, obviously, and I think we're getting better there. But it's the $64,000 question for all of us: does a specific content play or a specific tactic that we have in our mix really deliver, and how do you measure the interplay across all the multiple steps that happen in a journey? Those are and it starts to touch on marketing direct impact versus marketing influence, which is again that emotional conversation that CFOs want to get away from. But we all know it's real when you've got I think you asked a question earlier, how many steps in a buy, and ours is north of 20. It's 26. I think it's a big number of steps, right? And it's like in that world, it's like, how are you just focusing on optimizing and making sure that it's as simple and straightforward, and the experience itself is as good as you can make it? And that's just hard. I mean, that's the thing we don't have great answers to yet.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna move on attribution just because it's a pain, a thorn in the side. And we're gonna keep moving. So how much room, and maybe Deidre, you can speak to this, in the budget do you have for testing and experimentation, where you don't know what's going to happen, you don't know if it's going to pay out or not, but you're trying it because you always have to try things?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've gone through a few different iterations of how we structure the budget. At one point, we had, we called out a specific dollar amount that we were using just for branding, and testing kind of came under that branding umbrella. Then, as budgets got a little bit tighter and pockets got a little less deep, then you really do need to be able to make the case for testing, and you still do have to have room for it. But I think that the testing takes on kind of a different approach now. It's maybe not as broad as it may have been before, or it's very specific, just to like one or two attributes, as opposed to you maybe trying to test for a few different things. So it's gotten slimmer. We still try to incorporate testing within each of our channels where possible. So within paid media, there's always testing there with messaging and creative. Within our direct mail, we've done some testing, but I think we have more room to be able to do a bit more testing there. So the short answer is it's not as much.
Well, it's funny because in huddles we talked about that 10 or 20% that you would love to have in testing and experimentation. And as we were talking about working our way through recession planning, many folks said, if I have this budget and I actually call it testing and experimentation, that's going to go. That's going to just be grabbed. So one
right away.
was to just ignore it. I'm curious, Khalid or Kevin, do you actually have an experimentation budget, or you just experiment within the budget that you have? Khalid?
Yeah, that's how we are. We definitely experiment, but I don't necessarily carve out a separate budget. But we definitely, within what we have, try. We try things all the time, for sure.
Same. Yeah, same. I think we look at our tech stack, right? Like do we need a tool like Optimizely or the equivalent? I think that, and then just other resources is headcount. Like whose job is it to run the testing? To what extent are agencies testing everything that they're putting out there, et cetera, et cetera.
I just want to do a callback quickly. So you mentioned Alice as your vendor for providing online swag, right? Yeah, and that's the CMO that I was mentioning, that they talk about how so much branded swag goes to waste. Just wanted to connect those dots, and it's we'll link to it in the show notes. I think it's ALYCE. Just in case you haven't heard of that. Now, speaking of awareness, so all this conversation so far, we've been talking for like almost 44 minutes now, and we haven't talked about a KPI or any kind of awareness measures. And we all know that a lack of awareness is a huge disadvantage, especially when your salespeople are out there speaking with prospective customers. How, and Kevin, I'm going to point this at you. You and I have talked about this on other shows. Talk a little bit about how you make the case, how you're measuring awareness if you are, and how you make the case for raising it.
Yeah, well, it's we do measure it. What we do is we've done an annual study that and it's important, obviously, when you do this, that you have the same methodology, so that you're not, because change of methodology and your numbers get all different potentially. But we have a formal study we've done every year where we look at awareness across a number of different countries, and we do it competitively and certainly focused on our own. And the good news is we have a field team that for the most part really understands this, and they're actually asking for it, because, in B2B, especially, awareness, the importance of awareness is getting you into a bid opportunity, getting you on that short list. Low awareness really makes that very hard to do. So we track that, and we don't have it as a KPI actually, but we track it and report on it, and we show management kind of where we're at. And the good news is we've been investing in this a bit, and we've seen some very nice upward movement, which is what we want to see. But it's also a little bit of a dangerous area, because you don't want to declare victory just because you've seen improved awareness, right? Is it translating now into a higher number of opportunities, and can you connect some of those activities to actually deals in the pipeline? And that's one of the things we've done, is we've tried to say, okay, we've had the ability in certain deals be able to point back and go, wow, that account consumed the content in that awareness campaign. And so that's given us a little bit of insight as to whether or not we've been able to at least participate in or influence that deal cycle. And that's been helpful as we share that with management to say, look, and our field team, I mean, our CRO is like all over it. He loves it. And he wants us to be doing more. So we have the benefit of the doubt in many ways, because they believe conceptually in the need for it. And so we don't have to go beating on the door. But it always comes down to a trade-off. It's like, how much do you actually devote to that? And how much do you devote to your more tactical demand capture motion, which is more near term? And that's the big debate we have all the time. But we do measure it, and we have a formal way of measuring it, and we do think it's important, and we report on it.
Okay. So this is a quick answer. What's one metric that you wish you had, or if it was the only metric that you could have, what would that be? And I'll start with you, Deidre.
Are you talking about for awareness or just in general?
I think I'm talking about presenting to your board. The one metric you wish you had.
I think it's. I mean, we have this metric. I think that the single most important metric is just marketing generated revenue, tying that back to, different channels. And this is the amount of revenue that closed won deals that were generated through these marketing channels.
Kevin, Khalid, anything different there? One metric you wish you had, or the metric?
I wish I had a better understanding of everything. Their highest source of Marketing One revenue is organic in search, and I wish that I knew everything that went into that. And like Kevin, we have 20 plus touches that go into a sale, and I wish I better understood what each one was.
Yeah, okay. And I think it's like the golden metric, like marketing influence on closed revenue, right? That's like the metric is what I'm doing actually leading to revenue, and everything we do tries to piece that story together. But if there was one metric, it would be show me that we're actually driving top line growth. And that's, you have to piece together a story versus having that single metric today.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to do something different on this show. We're going to do the gin tasting in a second. At the end of that, we are actually going to record a Tuesday tip, which is something that we do in CMO Huddles. We'll get all of this done within the next 11 minutes. So whatever you had for final words of wisdom, save that for the Tuesday tip, which we will record. So Melissa, I think you're going to play the video, and then I'm going to go grab the gin, and any of us who are joining the gin tasting will grab their gin or just remember what you had when you tasted it before. Okay, run that video.
I love the way that you are able to bring together experts and practitioners to share their experiences and to accelerate learning.
Just by listening, I've tripled my experience.
It's a great way to have these conversations with your peers.
Even if you miss, an actual live session, just the capture you guys do of the notes, the tidbits, the takeaways, just super valuable.
It's such a nice forum to be able to bond with other marketing leaders that are facing the same things that you are.
There's just so much goodness from the learnings and the dialogue and everything else.
So it's really nice to connect to peers that are B2B.
The Slack channel, I think, is amazing. There's just some really helpful ideas and thoughts and things being shared in there as a backstop underneath the huddle actual meetings.
Because of the format of the CMO Huddles, there's, maybe 10, 15 people on each of the sub-peer groups, which makes it really easy to build one-on-one relationships.
It's a community that I think I really needed right now, so thank you.
If you're a B2B CMO who can share, care, and dare with the best of them, ping me, Drew Neiser, on LinkedIn or apply at CMOHuddles.com. Okay, Melissa, the world's fastest gin tasting. Here we go.
Yes. Okay, so we'll start with Brooklyn Gin. Contrary to the name, Brooklyn Gin is actually made upstate in Warwick Valley Winery and Distillery, and the founders, they designed this gin to showcase the vibrancy of fresh citrus peel. Also, interesting thing about this gin is the base spirit is entirely corn.
Oh,
so what do you
cool.
think? Yeah.
I don't taste it, but
you don't taste the corn. Is it citrusy?
Well, that's the thing. And if it is citrusy, is it any different from New Amsterdam? What do you think? Deidre,
I tasted it over the weekend because I knew we had a big customer dinner last night, and I knew I wouldn't want any gin today. And I think my bias is that I liked Brooklyn Gin because I live in Brooklyn. And I'm a marketer, so I'm a sucker for the branding. I didn't realize though that they are not based in Brooklyn.
Close enough.
Deidre, what'd you think?
I'm not usually a gin drinker, and I'm from Queens, so I it despite the name. But it's not bad. That's the best I could say. I'm not really a gin drinker.
There you go. All right. Well, I think Melissa, what else?
The second gin is New Amsterdam, which is not made in Amsterdam. It's distilled in Modesto, California by E.J. Gallo Distillery, and they're known for their vodka, but the gin came first. So this is also a very citrus forward gin. I guess the difference is California versus New York. And yeah, what do you think, Drew?
Oh my God, New Amsterdam is so much more citrus forward. I mean, it's like they already dropped the lemon, like half a lemon in there. And and frankly, I like it for that. And it's like, if you just want to put a gin on ice and just sip it, it's almost like a gin and tonic without the tonic. Whereas I think the Brooklyn is a little more sophisticated. It makes you work a little bit more to find the taste. It's like New Amsterdam just punches you. Say, hey, lemon.
So Brooklyn Gin is quite sophisticated. One of the botanicals is kumquat. So we're going to bring our botanical expert, Nicole, on, and she can tell us what that is.
Nicole, hello.
Hello. So kumquat are small fruit-bearing trees native to southern and eastern Asia. The first record of this plant goes back to Chinese literature to the 12th century CE. And while the taste is closely to orange, the fruit is smaller and it's similar size to an olive. And the good thing is that you don't have to peel it to eat it.
And believe it or not, my parents had kumquat trees in our backyard growing up in Southern California, and those trees are still producing. So there you are. All right, Nicole, thank you. Melissa, thank you. So, all right, we're going to wrap up this show, and then we're going to do a Tuesday tip. So first I will say, so let's bring on Kevin too. Cool. So I want to thank the three of you. You're great sports. And I want to thank the audience for staying with us. Stick around after the show to see the behind the scenes of our Tuesday tip series. You get to see the sausage made. And then join us in 2 weeks. We'll be talking about brands taking a stand with some amazing guests. We'll be right back with that. Okay, so let's cue the music. Renegade Marketers Live is produced by Melissa Caffrey. Our intern is Laura Parkin. Our botanical expert is Nicole Hernandez. For show notes, past episodes, and the latest on my new book, Renegade Marketing 12 Steps to Building Unbeatable B2B Brands, please visit renegade.com. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep those Renegade thinking caps on and strong. All right, let's go back. Awesome. Okay, so Melissa, if you'll start with me, and then we'll go straight into it. Hey, it's Drew Neiser with a special Tuesday tip edition. We're actually recording this live right on top of our Renegade Marketers Live show. Anyway, we've been talking about marketing metrics, and we have 3 CMOs who are going to share some tips on how to get your metrics right. So first up, Kevin Sellers, Ping Identity. Kevin, what is your tip?
Well, there's so many to say. I just would say, really look at the metrics you have and focus on things that are impact related versus activity related. Activity related can lead you to the wrong direction. You can feel good about the things you've gotten done. They may not actually deliver business impact. So start with that business impact that you're trying to deliver: revenue growth, customer acquisition, the core things. Maybe it's, customer retention, whatever it might be, but that actually hits the P&L and is an impact to the business, and work your metrics from that, rather than falling into the trap of saying you did certain things and you did them well. That's kind of, I think, old school marketing.
It's a couple of key parts of that tip is you got to talk about metrics that matter to the organization, not just matters to your department. And so by putting it in the context of driving revenue, you have the attention of the organization, and marketing is a meaningful, important investment that the company is making. Okay. So tip number 2 from Deidre Hudson. Deidre, what is your tip?
Yes. So I would say, similarly to looking at metrics that matter to the organization, look at the metrics that is being used to judge the overall health of the business. And if you can, bring that down to your channel, so that you're looking at not only your channel specific metrics, but you're looking at it through the lens of the metrics that the company is measuring itself, so that you can get better context, fuller context, and the full picture.
Right. So we've got a pipeline metric that we know we want all of marketing to do. And then we're looking below that at channel to see how a channel, we could call it direct mail, we could call it paid search, we could call it events, is actually doing it. So we have some distinction. Okay. Khalid Khatib from Slack Overflow. Khalid, what is your tip?
Stack Overflow. I say Slack Overflow all the time. We're big Slack users, so I do it too. And I'm the CMO. I think my point relates to what Kevin shared, which is also around cross-functional alignment and thinking org-wide. And that's just aligning all of your partners from the start when you put together your executive dashboard. There are some marketers who will lead with metrics that matter to them or that tell a really great story, and then can't withstand the scrutiny of the CFO, for example, or the CRO will sort of disparage the efforts of marketing behind the scenes. But if you have that cross-functional alignment from the start, everyone knows what your definitions are and their shared definitions, then it's a much more seamless process as you go through a quarter and through a year.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because it's funny, we talk about this a lot in huddles, is you've got, what's a lead? What's a marketing qualified lead? What's pipeline? What is, and what are these things? And you can't just say those words. You actually have to sit down with sales, and you have to sit down with the SDRs or whoever else and actually define them. And the other thing we talked about is, you better have clean data to help you assess that. And so watch who's putting data into Salesforce, for example, because if they're not careful, your rest of your data streams will be poor. I'm curious because we have 30 seconds left, and I'm going to push this one to awareness. Kevin Sellers, one tip on how to capture that and make sure that it's actually a relevant metric for the organization.
Well, it comes down to asking, the marketplace, and you can do that in a number of ways. We do a formal study, which I know can be expensive, but you can do this through surveys and other things. But you have to listen to the market. They're the ones that get to tell you whether or not your brand is meaningful or not. So finding a way to measure your current state and then being able to measure from that point going forward to see if you have real progress happening. But it has to start someplace, stay consistent with your methodology, and continue to measure as you go forward. That'll give you the best source of information as to whether or not you're actually making improvements and progress on awareness broadly.
Okay. So we got a lot of great tips there. First of all, you have to have metrics. Second of all, they have to be meaningful to the business. Third, you can look at them by channel. Fourth, don't forget about awareness. It matters. We know it matters. Okay. That's your Tuesday tip. If you are a B2B CMO who can share, care, and dare with the best of them, check out CMOHuddles.com. I'm Drew Neiser, and that's your Tuesday tip. Peace out.